Okay, I have my cup of tea and I have some questions for you. Are you there, Jess?
I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So today we've been chatting, haven't we, recently about ADHD in the
Mhm.
workplace, and it's quite a powerful one, really. Really good topic that we do need to discuss. So first of all, I just thought I'd say, for anyone who's listening, or for those who are going to read the newsletter, that they probably are aware of this, but I've noticed that there are estimated 7% of adults in the world who are affected by ADHD or ADD. And out of that percentage, there comes some of the world's most influential people. So that's something that you actually came up with recently. So we'll chat about that a bit later on. But I just thought it was really interesting that approximately 7% of adults actually deal with this.
Yeah.
So it's really important for you and I to remember that we're not on our own. This is something that you've been diagnosed with, and only in the recent years. And it is something that I am waiting for diagnosis on, which I highly suspect that I do have it also, in different ways to you as well, which is really interesting to know that it's not the same for everyone, is it?
No, that's right.
Yeah. So in the workplace, do you find that it has an impact on you?
Yeah, absolutely. Essentially, I think I find that it causes me to get distracted, to procrastinate. Also, I think it affects the level of work in that what I find is I am a perfectionist. And so when things don't go the way I want them to, I find that I really struggle with that. Or if somebody says to me, well, you've done this wrong, I take it so personally, and it becomes this, it feels like my world is spiraling out of control. I think they call it rejection sensitivity dysphoria, where you cannot take any form of critique or criticism because it completely makes you, that's all you can focus on. It's like, I can't even explain it. It's a physical sensation as well as a mental one, that my heart sinks to the bottom of my stomach, my eyes go almost like they shake, and I feel sick to my stomach. And I'm like, I don't know how to fix it. I need to fix it. And sometimes, mistakes happen. It's part of life. And in this business, everybody does things slightly differently. And what you tend to find is some people will say to you, well, this isn't right, when actually, no, it's not that it's not right. It's just you do it a completely different way from the next person, and it's not, even though there are generally acceptable accounting principles, often from time to time, the bookkeeping will be slightly different, depending on not just theory, but practical, where you've worked in the past as well. So what tends to happen then is if somebody says, well, you've got this wrong, you've not done this right, it's like, oh, like that physical sensation. So it affects me in that area. I think there's as well the hyper focus, where I won't focus on anything, and then I can't put my finger on it. I can't tell you how or why or when. Suddenly I'll be so fixated on getting something done that I will essentially just that's all I'll think about, and that's what I'll do, and I'll overwork and make myself overly tired. So I think the simple answer to the question is, it absolutely does affect my day-to-day work as well.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I think the hyper focus bit was actually what initially drove me to realize that there was something different about me, and that it wasn't the same as everybody else. Is because I can be just like you, and I'm going to talk about that in a second as well. It is really interesting, and I'd love to know what it's like in someone else's brain, to be honest, because it's quite tiring in mine, and I'm sure it's the same in yours. And I think this is a really good conversation, because it's not just about in the workplace. I think it's important as well for not just for the employees, but for the employers like yourself, but also employers that don't understand this, who don't have anything like this themselves. And they're neurotypical, apparently. And from a perspective of an employer who doesn't understand it, this is something they really need to listen to, and to
absolutely
appreciate that there are going to be some employees And these may be the reasons why they are asking for flexi time. These may be the reasons why they're looking for regular work from home, because of the focus, because of the lack of distractions, perhaps. In an office environment, they might struggle more. Or it might be the other way around. They may need to have more office time because they need to have people around them in order to be able to be more productive. So it really does depend. Everybody is different, and we can't all be put under the same, under the same category, because we all deal with it differently. But I have another question for you.
Go.
When do you feel you're most productive? And then the other bit is, when are you least productive in the day?
Oh, that's a very good question, actually. I actually don't think I can time it, which is probably the most frustrating thing about it, because from day to day, I can be really productive or really not. It's all dependent on what's going on in the background. Oftentimes, I'll come alive at night, but I will have still struggled through an entire however many hours of work. So the last thing really that I want to be doing is work at night. But I think actually it's all dependent on external factors to some degree. So if there's a lot of stress going on, I will either, again, it goes back to that hyper focus. I'll either hyper focus and be super productive, or I won't, and I'll just procrastinate and push things forward. And I also find that there's a lot of exhaustion, a lot of physical tiredness that's involved as well. So it's a really tough one, actually, because I don't really know. I think there's a lot of it I have to, for a lot of people, it doesn't work. Like the to-do lists and things, they help, but they don't work all the time. But I think unless I get it out on paper, or in this case, a digital planner, then I find I'm much more productive that way. And as long as I schedule in the small breaks, like coffee breaks or even toilet breaks, essentially Luke will often say how he can't look at my calendar because it's like it's micromanaged. It's down to the minute. I think that's probably one of the biggest ways I not make myself productive, but I gain productivity.
Right. I really want to be more like you there. That's interesting though as well, because for me, I'm most active at night also, in different ways though. Not every night as well, just like you. And some people can be more energetic, can't they, once the sun goes down? It's really interesting. And you find with the hyper focus, for example, does it feel like it's just once you get into a zone, you just don't want to lose that momentum. You just want to keep carrying on.
That's it. Because I think if I stop, then and oftentimes I'll come up with some of those the best ideas in that moment of hyper focus. So it's like I don't want to switch off because I'm worried I won't have that for a while. Like I said, it can't be timed.
No, and for me, it's more I'm worried that I'm going to forget it. So I want to jot it down quickly, or send myself a text message to remind me for the next morning to put it where it needs to go. Because I'm worried I'm going to forget that important thing. And I've looked into it. Research has shown as well that ADHD is prone to a delayed sleep phase syndrome. They call it DSPS, and it apparently happens when your body is out of sync with regular sleep wake patterns, and that people with this disorder tend to fall asleep later, and as a result wake up later. Do you find that you could be in that category too?
Yeah, it's funny because I've suffered from insomnia since I was a baby, or at least that's what it was diagnosed with. But there's probably a lot of symptoms that point to that, really, because I would fall asleep late, and then my mum and dad would have to, even as a 9-month-old baby, they'd have to drive me around in a car at 3 o'clock in the morning to get me to sleep. But then they'd have to wake me up at a relatively reasonable time so that it didn't happen again. And it was as a parent for a 9-month-old, that's really tough because babies need their sleep. But the problem is that it was exacerbated. If I just kept going, then it would just carry on. And oftentimes my mum, we might come on to this, I don't know, but my mum took me to the doctors to get some medicine to help me sleep, and it was called, I think it was called Finnegan's, which was like a sleeping tonic for babies. And he's like, well, it works with like 99%, but there's a 1% it doesn't. So it was something that was used to help babies sleep. I fell into the very small percentage where it did the absolute opposite. The idea that the stimulants or the kind of drugs that help you fall asleep are the ones that keep me awake, and vice versa. That it seems to have the opposite effect.
So that's what you were telling me about recently about coffee.
Yeah.
So coffee actually makes you sleepy.
Yeah, and that's tough because it's part of my. It's what's weird is I wouldn't say that I am a routine animal really. But I do have a routine of when I wake up in the morning. Starting the day without that first sip of coffee is really tough, but it's not because of the caffeine, I've realized. It's because I just really enjoy the taste of it, and probably the comfort that it gives me as well. But yeah, anything, so like what we've discovered is if I have any form of spirits late at night, they keep me awake, whereas they'd send other people to sleep. But coffee, any form of caffeinated beverage, they call them caffeine naps, like the ADHD caffeine naps, where when you have strong caffeine drinks, then they make you feel sleepy.
Wow, that is just crazy, isn't it? I mean, I've been off caffeine for over 10 years now, as in a regular routine of caffeine. Shocked many friends of mine who knew that I absolutely loved my tea and my coffee. But it was just really important to me. It just didn't feel worth the feeling unwell, because it actually spikes my blood pressure, and it doesn't do that for everybody. That's the crazy part. It's everybody's so different. But I found definitely that I'm better without caffeine. But even if, if I'm at a friend's house and they don't have anything else and I really do fancy a hot drink, if I do have a weak tea, for example, I still don't feel great after it. So it's really interesting how it works for some, doesn't work for others. And yeah, like you now, I find it really difficult, and I have been finding it really difficult to get to sleep at night, and I have done for years. And when I was a child, I would actually have music on at night time to help me drift off to sleep. So the radio would be on in the night, just to get me off to sleep, a bit like, I suppose, white noise that a lot of people would use. They'd have different techniques, and I would have to have that. And when I was newly married, I still needed my piece in the background. And I, again, did not associate it to anything. I just thought it was me and my preferences. And my husband was just like, I really can't sleep with music on. So then I had to start getting used to earpods at night. And of course, they're not very comfortable, are they, at nighttime?
No,
you're trying to lie down. So I have perfected it. I have one earpod in one ear, on the one that's on the pillow, on the other side of the pillow, and I still need that sometimes. And some nights I don't, if I'm really, really tired. But most nights I will. Most nights I still do years later.
I listen to a podcast every night because I need that background noise. It used to be that I'd stick something on the iPad, a TV program. One time when I went away with a friend, I was watching a documentary about something ridiculous, and I say watching because I fell asleep within the first 5 minutes, and it kept playing on. And because of the subject material was just a bit odd, it completely freaked her out. She's like, I don't know how you managed to sleep through that. And I'm like, well, it's these little things that people are like, oh, I don't understand why you do that. And
I did that in the ferry, actually. I didn't expect myself to fall asleep in the ferry one time recently, coming back from Ireland, but I was absolutely exhausted and I was the only driver. So I was just absolutely shattered, and there was some weird stuff on the telly and I managed to sleep right through it. It was just like, how do you do that? But sometimes you just can. It's really funny. But again, they do say that this, instead of having a typical, what is it, a circadian rhythm? I don't know.
Oh, circadian rhythm,
that one. Yeah. Instead of having that where you go to sleep at 11 at night and you can wake up around 7 in the morning, a lot of people have irregular patterns, where I think you and I have got that a bit, where you can eventually get to sleep around 2 or 3 at night and you'd be still asleep maybe till 9, 10 in the morning. Now for me, because I'm a mum, I'm not usually awake too late necessarily, depending on the night of sleep. If I've had a good night's sleep, I can be awake and up well before that. But if I've had a bad night's sleep, or if my husband's had a bad night's sleep, then it's a late morning for me. Now, how does the lack of sleep affect you personally? Kind of bridged on it a little.
I think over the years it's weird because I've got used to it. So it's only like if I have 3 or 4 bad days where I've not slept well or at all, that's when I'll feel the effects more. But I think it increases the lack of concentration, also the emotional impact that it has on me, in that I feel everything just feels a little bit more unmanageable and overwhelming.
Intense. Yeah.
I can't cope with things quite as well unless I'm refreshed, to some degree. And then there is, of course, if I do sleep, sometimes it won't be good sleep. It'll be, I won't realize, but it'll be broken. And it you know, they say about, this is one of the reasons they say about not drinking before you go to bed, because of course the quality of your sleep isn't great as it would be if you didn't. The issue being is that, you know, sometimes you've got to, like, I have a cup of coffee before bed, and find that just helps me calm down, but I can't say what that's actually doing for my sleep quality. But yeah, I think there's a lot of that, you know, sleep is when our body repairs itself. You know, I've got epilepsy and I've got fibromyalgia, so two neurological conditions, and they both play off stress and exhaustion. So oftentimes if I'm tired and stressed, then my pain levels for the fibro will really, I mean, the last few nights has been horrendous. But also then the epilepsy starts playing up, and that's where it becomes dangerous. So the issue is I can't, as much as I might not sleep for 2 or 3 nights, I can't really afford to. But yeah, there's so many things really that I think the lack of sleep affects. You know, whether you have additional health concerns on top of it, you know, even just managing the day-to-day things is tough when you don't have the right amount of sleep.
Yeah, completely agree. I know I struggle quite a bit when it comes to if I haven't had good enough sleep or I haven't had enough sleep. Not exactly, I don't function very well first thing in the morning. And it can affect the way my day goes then, as to how slow I am, if I'm like a sloth or not, basically. And it's frustrating then when you have things to do and you've got your to-do list. Now I have to learn to prioritize my to-do list, because otherwise I either get stuck and I have what they apparently say is like an ADHD paralysis, where you just can't move, and I have that sometimes, where I'm stuck. I'm struggling to even function, and I have then moments where I can just do one thing. So I do an easy thing to get me a bit of momentum, a bit of motivation, and then I'm able to dig into some juicier stuff. So it's really interesting how it can affect us in different ways, but sleep is a massive part. And it's something I've been working with essential oils and things, trying to help my sleep, which it's definitely improving. But I'm still a bit sluggish some days, for whatever reason. And stress can be actually a big part as well to play, I think, in that as well. Do you find that medication can help you personally?
For
Has it helped
the
you?
ADHD,
Yes.
I chose not to have the normal steps. It's a bit difficult because there's some things that I can't take with my epilim. That has to kind of take priority over anything else.
Absolutely.
So I've not really tried conventional stimulants. You know, tramadol, as a side point, I take when my pain for my fibro is horrendous, and that does have an impact as a stimulant. And I find that my brain quietens when I take that. The issue with that is it lowers the seizure threshold, so it makes me really ill. It's not something that, you know, I can take. And then, you know, the treatments like CBD oil, for instance, they can help the epilepsy, but they negatively impact ADHD as well to some degree. So it's a really tough one when you're dealing with certain neurological disorders as well. I have, and you know, I'm not endorsing it, but I am going to be trying some new supplements that have helped ADHD medicated patients come off the prescription meds and move on to these, and they're all natural. So you take a test and they tell you which ones, based on the answers you've chosen, which ones they think would be better for you.
Right.
You can order a starter pack, or you can just go with what they suggest, and you can do it on a subscription basis. And people have seen some really good results with that. And to be honest, if I can just take something to quieten my brain, even just more than it is right now, that would be really, really good.
Yeah.
So I think, like, I know that caffeine works as something that calms me, but it also sends me to sleep. So yeah, I think it's finding a balance. It's speaking to your doctor. It's seeing what you can take, what works with your body. And a lot of prescription stimulants as well have quite bad side effects as well. So that's the other thing to consider, that it's
Yeah.
just being careful that you can handle the side effects. You know, sometimes it's almost like a better the devil, you know, like with the Epilin for the epilepsy, for instance. That's got horrendous side effects, but it's the only medication that actually gives me a quality of life. So I have to just say okay to the side effects and take it so that I can live day to day. That's the reality of it. So
I mean, really, when you do take medication, you're not taking it to have the side effects. You're really hoping that it assists the condition that you've got that you need help with. And it's hard, because when you are taking different medications for different things, then it's actually trying to find them all to work with each other as well, isn't it? Like you're saying, it's making sure that they're balanced well. Because it's one of those things, but it's definitely a good idea. Talk to your doctor. Talk to the expert. Tell them what medication you're actually on, so that they know if it's going to suit or not. But definitely, I think going down a natural route is a really good idea. But even then, just double checking that they're okay with the medication.
Absolutely. Always check with your doctor.
Yeah,
always.
It's so important. So going into the kind of the work side of things, then you mentioned earlier about how you feel when you feel like you failed, or like with rejection, or someone telling you you've done something wrong, and that what happens to your quality of work, do you feel, or your way of functioning for the day or for the week? Just in a quite a general way, I suppose, but how do you find, because you mentioned earlier about it sends your brain into a bit of a spiral.
I think what you said about ADHD paralysis actually is probably true, that I do find that I'm not able to function at a level of high quality when that happens. And people say, well, you got to get on with it, that these things happen. Yeah, okay, that's true, they do happen. But what people have to understand, and I don't think this is very well understood, is that this is not a choice. This is a medical issue. Like, this is something that I have very little control over. Which is why, it's taken a while to find the perfect solution. When I say it's not going to be the perfect solution, but to find a solution that works with the various other things I've got going on. But yeah, so I think it does. I think I'd be sitting here telling a lie if I said no, I don't let it affect the quality of my work, because it will. It always does. I mean, and as well, I think that has to come around to the fact that that's one of the reasons I really struggle to set boundaries. Like, we work compressed hours in 3 days a week, right? Because we want to be able to do other things. We set up this business for us, and accounting is a demanding profession. And sometimes I think there are clients who are quite demanding. We've got some fabulous clients who are really respectful, but a lot of the time it's me who's not respectful of my own boundaries. So it's a case that, right, how do it's a conversation that Luke and I have often, because he's really good at leaving it at the door, and I'll deal with that when I get back in. And I'm like, no, I need to deal with it now. Like, it's a now thing. So, like, not replying to emails outside of work hours, and having contactable hours, or putting on an out of office. The reason why I have a permanent out of office is to try and help me with boundaries. But of course, because we offer WhatsApp support and we have the work phone, sometimes that can be a real challenge to put that to one side. And sometimes the anxiety and stress over not checking it. And it's unbelievable, really, and I think going back to that, how it affects my work when somebody does say something, even when someone doesn't say something, but it's implied, or I think it's implied, or I think that they're going to imply it. It's like I jump to a worst case scenario every time.
That's
without fail.
considered catastrophizing, isn't it?
Yeah,
I've read that before, where it seems to be you think the worst of every situation, and you think the worst of everything, and
yeah,
that apparently is something I do as well. So I can catastrophize. That's such a great word. But
it
yeah,
is a good
I
word.
understand. Yeah, it's not an easy one either, because it feels
No,
so negative, and it takes over the joy, doesn't it? It saps
it
the joy.
does. Yeah,
And it's
and
something that
that's
perhaps people don't think about, that their words have such power. And
yeah,
it's frustrating when you can allow that power to take over your day or your week, just because of some simple words that perhaps could have been said differently. It's really,
yeah,
really difficult. And my husband's the same. He's able to just switch off in some aspects, he's able to leave, leave work at the door. Whereas that can be a real difficulty, especially if your brain spins like yours and mine can. So it is really good. I love the way that you've set your boundaries, especially with the out of office. And I mean, if anyone's seen our out of office notes, they will notice it's not normal. It's pretty silly as well, and it's fun. But that's because we're personalities. We've got our own personalities. We are trying to make the best out of a difficult situation. It's something we don't necessarily want to have these boundaries in place where we're having to say sorry, but you're going to have to wait for us.
yeah,
We'll get to you. You're on our list, and you will always get checked. But it's just that we do also have our own family lives that everybody else has, and we're trying to prioritize, aren't we, to make it work for us as a
yeah.
company and as individuals.
And I think as well, just to mention that I've had it before in the past where I've set my boundaries, but other people, and I don't know whether oftentimes people realize they do it, or they just think, I wonder how far I can push it. Where
Mm,
I've set my boundaries and I've resolved to be really strict, and
mm,
they're the ones who've crossed them. And that makes me feel like I need to cross them.
mm,
And that's when getting back into the boundaries can be really difficult, because you feel, well, I need to do something about this right now, because
mm,
they want me to do something about this right now. It feeds into people pleasing,
mm,
right? And it's such a bizarre thing, because I'll go through phases, and I really will, and it's like Luke will say it, I'm either all or nothing. So like, and that can be in both negative and positive ways. So all in the sense that I need to people please and I cross all of my boundaries, and I can't leave anything at the door, or nothing in the sense that um I'm just like, I'll deal with that when I have when I need to deal with it in my time, but that's still in good time for the client or whatever situation. And I'll be really pragmatic about it. Like, it's a really strange thing that you can literally go from feeling like everything is controlled by emotion to
mm.
almost robotic pragmatism.
Yeah.
I can't, and there's no balance.
There's
There is
no medium.
absolutely
Yeah.
no balance. I can't do one or the other.
Mm,
It's I can't do, sorry, a mixture of both. It has to
mm,
be one of the other. And in many respects, weirdly, I would prefer to be robotically pragmatic, because I think it would help me sleep better. I'd feel less stressed and anxious all the time.
mm.
I'd rather be a pragmatist than somebody who has high emotion. But unfortunately, it doesn't fall it, and I can't, again, it goes back to not being able to control it. Like, some days
Yeah.
I'll wake up and think, I'm not dealing with this is ridiculous. They
Yeah.
can, we'll sort this way, and we're doing it this way. And then other days I've just got to be like, people please, people please,
And it's
people
all
please.
consuming when that happens, isn't
Oh,
it?
everything, yeah. So it's
Yeah.
just a really weird thing, and I think it's, again, getting people to understand that there's absolutely no balance in
Mm, mm.
anything, with anything.
Yeah. And I think the reason why we're kind of coming up with this conversation and this discussion is because it's really important for people to understand the brain and
Yeah,
the needs and the frustrations that we on the other side have got. If you're not familiar with ADHD, you're not going to know all these things that happen inside the brain that we
no.
do not have control over. And this is
And
the crazy thing, is like you just said, it's either an all or nothing thing, but that's not out of our choice.
yeah,
We're naturally going to go one way or the other. And
I
it's
think
like we work really hard to work on those, don't we?
that's it. And I think it just something to mention, which is just a good reminder for everybody in any business, no matter what they're doing. For me, ADHD makes me a perfectionist, and that's not a good thing because nobody's perfect, meaning that me trying to attain to perfection is completely impossible. I will always fall short of the standards I set myself. And then what happens is that, like I said, the industry itself is demanding to the point where sometimes I wonder whether it's something I really want to carry on with. I do love my job. What I don't love is the constant demand. And the fact is there is an expectation. This is a conversation I've had with other accountants in the industry, that people expect you to never make a mistake. And that's really tough because mistakes naturally happen and occur, you know, or misunderstandings with certain things that can then be resolved. There's a whole host of circumstances where you're like, well, do you know what? Yeah, I hold my hands up and say that I did this wrong. When people expect perfection, even though realistically, logically, it's not attainable, and they expect perfection of a person who's already a perfectionist.
Yeah.
What that then means is that when mistakes do happen, it's really hard to hold your hands up and say, yep, that was me. I own that. And I know that's going to sound like, well, how many mistakes has she made? Well, do you know what? I do, but I will always try and fix or repair any mistakes I make. And I make a habit of making as little or few mistakes as possible. We double check our work, the reasons we've got our systems and processes, but just generally in life, or if you run a business, you're going to know that you can't get everything right 100% of the time.
Yeah.
It's a really tough thing.
We've got to even put that out there. How many of us can put up our hand and say we've never made a mistake in our lives, whether it be in work or personal life?
I'd like to meet that person, because that person then should, in theory, be perfect.
Exactly, and nobody is.
No.
So I suppose that's another thing, because I don't know about you, but for me anyway, it's something. I'm also a perfectionist in many ways, and a bit of a control freak, I have been told. And I'm working on that a lot, to be honest, because that's not who I want to be. It's not how I feel. I don't feel comfortable in that role. I would much rather be a kinder, softer person in comparison to that. That kind of makes me feel really awkward and uncomfortable sometimes, thinking about needing that control, you know. And I'm learning to let go, if that makes sense. So I'm trying, you know, I'm apologizing quicker than I ever used to in the past. If I've done something to upset someone, or I've done something wrong, I apologize. And that's in personal life or in work as well. But it's really valuable to remember that we're never going to get it absolutely perfect. And really, the quality that everyone, whether we've got ADHD or not, is a forgiveness sort of feeling, because none of us are ever going to get it perfect.
Absolutely. And no matter what industry we're in. And that's it, you know.
And it's absolutely true. Like, accounting is a very important and valuable business to be in. It's a really important place. And I think that anyone who has a good accountant, it's an asset, isn't it, in their life. But it's really good to recognize that as perfectionists, actually, we are really focused on doing our very, very best, but we're still not always get it perfect, but we are going to always do our very, very best.
That's
and
it.
it's this actually I want to come on to next. So we've gone through the difficulties and the negatives, the way it can affect us with procrastination and forgetfulness, the rejection sensitivity dysphoria, the people pleasing, boundary setting, perfectionism. We've talked about that. And even self-esteem is in there as well, how it affects our self-esteem when we're overwhelmed or we've had negative experiences, how it can affect us as people. But, and as well, something I read too about academic performances. So I know you're very smart and I know you're very, like, you're the number ninja here. So you love your numbers and you're really clever. And you seem to soak in everything that you learn. For me, I am the other way. So I am very good at learning computers, like computer programs and things like that. I can pick that up quite quickly, especially if I'm actually practically doing it. So I'm doing it there and then. But I'm not academic when it comes to, like, I'm just not that person who enjoys learning lots of things and doing exams and passing them with flying colors. I need to be the person touching things, doing things, and learning that way. I'm a much more visual learner. how do you find, how has your ADHD affected you when it comes to academia?
That's a really good question, because oh man, yeah, it's been kind of a journey. I'm probably one of the biggest things I think that made me think it can't be ADHD is the fact that my understanding of ADHD was always young boys in school who got easily distracted and didn't do very well
That was
in
my understanding
academic
too.
subjects, right? But
Yeah.
I was all through school, I was an A-star student. That being said, that wasn't actually quite the case, because so in my level, when I was in year 2, I got the highest grades in my SATs, my SATs for that year. And then we did, every year we'd do mock SATs leading up to like key stage. So key stage 1, key stage 2 SATs. And of course, those were sat in year 6. I'd had great teachers all the way through. In year 5, had a horrendous teacher, and I didn't quite realize how bad. And my quality of work went absolutely down the drain. I got stood up in front of a class of 30, how old would I have been, 10-year-olds, and basically told I would never amount to anything. And that was really, I mean, as a 10-year-old, I don't know whether it fully sunk in.
That's quite disgraceful as well, though, because if my child
let
was
me
told
tell
that,
you, my mother marched into that school and she
good woman.
wiped the floor with him. But not just him. What was actually really amazing was my Key Stage 4 teacher, Mr. Freeman, who will always hold a really special place in my heart, because he said to the teacher, "I've seen what she can do. It's not her, it's you." And I think that's a really important part of, and this isn't the first time this has happened. So it happened again when I came out of school. I was homeschooled for the last 2 years. It was the worst thing that could have ever happened, because I just get so distracted. So I think the key was, in a focused academic environment with an excellent educator, I knew what I could achieve, and I'd fly through any exam or anything, because I had the right set of circumstances to be able to achieve that. And I had belief behind me. I had a good support network and structure, and I could focus because I knew then what I wanted. I knew what I was capable of. And that sounds really big-headed, but I don't mean for it to be. I know that with the right people and the right support network, I could get the best. And I always wanted to be the best, which is like that competitive spirit I've had to work on a little bit over the years. And then fast forward to college, I was doing my AAT part-time while working part-time, and then volunteering part-time. And my college tutor said, "You're not putting enough time and energy into this, you're going to fail." And I was like, it's like almost like a repetitive thing happening over every part in so at some stage in my life, probably in every decade, or maybe every decade, I've experienced that kind of being told I'm going to amount to nothing, or being told I'm failing or not doing very good. Anyway, that year I flew through the exams and passed with the highest marks the college had seen. And that was, so I was like, well, I know then that I can be capable. And to be honest, even though that tutor may have said that, she was an excellent teacher. So there was an element of, even though somebody didn't, maybe at that stage, I realized that it's about the education and the way that a person portrays the information. Not all, if you've got an outside network that supports you in what you want to do, and that, to be honest, that my mum and dad have always been amazing from that perspective. My dad's, I didn't want to do accounting, but he said, go to college, get something that you can fall back on, and then you can never have to, if you never have to use it, great. And of course, lo and behold, fast forward, I did use it. But my mum and dad were always there. My mum would have fought anybody who said that I couldn't do anything, and my dad absolutely will always say, even now, and it gets me really emotional, but I know what you're capable of doing. I've never seen it. That's so it's, I think academically there was a lot of up and downs, but I enjoyed that. I love mathematics. I don't like algebra. Luke will tell you, he's the algebra person, But
What is
mental
it?
arithmetic,
Pythagoras theorem as well?
no, that I love that. I love that. You give me
No.
that, I'm happy, right? Trigonometry, mental arithmetic, all of, but algebra, I don't want to see quadratic equations. I don't want to know
No.
them. I can do them, but I don't like them. But in general, mathematics was, and to some degree science actually. Anything and language, those three elements of the brain are all connected, it turns out. So I did music, language, science and maths at school, and I
No wonder
actually
you
excelled
enjoyed.
in all of those areas.
Yeah.
But it's a really tough one. Like I'm constantly doing CPD, and I'm constantly learning. Even now, Luke and I were talking the other day to a friend of ours who's been an accountant for 20 plus years. He's taught in colleges, and he started some new work and was doing something new with year ends. And he said it's just it's always a learning process, and that's the thing. That is the thing. You never stop.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's been a bit of a struggle. I'll still say that I haven't aced anything, as in without work and diligence and concentration and the right set of circumstances. So I think, yeah, it's definitely impacted me. And like I said to you, probably every decade or every few years in my life, I've hit someone who said, you were wrong, you're going to fail, you can't do this, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do this is another one. And it hurts. It really does hurt, because you work so hard to try and show that you are at the absolute best at what you do. And when someone turns around and says, you're rubbish, you shouldn't do it, you're like, right, okay, thank you.
See, that's the question then when it comes to people that are so negative like that. I question their reasoning behind it, because if they're trying to do it to help you, to like push you forward, to motivate you, then it's still wrong. It's still wrong the way they've done it. And if I'm honest, coming from a parent's side of it, I mean, I've got 2 young children, and I can see the difference between my negativity with them and my positivity with them. So I think they thrive on praise, not in an egotistical weird way. It just they appreciate being appreciated, and they seem to appreciate being praised and thought well of. So they don't like being told they're wrong. None of us do. None of us like to be told we're wrong.
No.
I guess sometimes we do have to say it if it's really important. We do have to say it as a learning sense.
Yeah, and I think
still it's the way you say it, isn't it?
That's an important point as well, though, because like going back to my parents, I would fight against things a lot. And the one thing about my dad that I'll say is that he never ever said, well, you're wrong. He never said it. There were times when he looked at me and I knew what he was thinking, but he would always make me reason out why I thought that way. And this is what kind of made me realize I was much more of a lateral thinker, because sometimes I'll get to the right answer, but I'll do it in a way that's completely different from other people. He used to call the way that I reason things Jessica logic, like it belonged to, it was a completely different way. At our wedding, when he gave his speech, he said, I've got Jessica logic. So he would make me reason things out, and I would have to come to my own conclusion that I wasn't right, and that would hurt even more.
I know, because it's that realization, isn't it?
The pride. It's the pride, but
yes,
it did
completely.
It did me the world of good. And my dad is very good at, he gives praise in a way that makes me want to work harder, not just be like, look at me, I can do this. It's a case that, and I will always, and I say this to my mum, it's always my dad I will seek it from. And it just more, I think, because my dad has achieved a lot academically, and most of it's self-taught. He's a very, very intelligent man, and my mum is too. Very intelligent woman in a very different way. But again, which is really so I've got this mix of them both, which I'm really grateful for.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. Fascinating. Yeah. Oh, well, do you know, it's interesting because like all those things that we've just discussed, the negative side, especially when it comes to ADHD, it's interesting because you mentioned to me recently that all these things are like the darker side of ADHD. Yeah. Which also reminded me of Star Wars, by the way, when you said that.
The dark side, yeah,
the dark side. But and it's really important, like we've said already, specific things can trigger us. Like so certain triggers can either make things easier or make things more difficult, right? And it's really difficult for us to recognize it, or other people to recognize it. It's really hard to process it. So in what I was looking at in research wise was I was looking at it thinking it really is about employers and other employees trusting in that person who has these difficulties to know that they understand the way their brain works,
Yeah.
to be aware and to be forgiving of anything
Yes.
that's different to the way that they think.
And to
And it's
utilize it as well, I
yes,
think that needs, because
yes,
I think the reality is, like, both Luke and I have our own neurodivergence. So I'm one way, he's the other.
mhm,
And that's what makes us the perfect balance. We work so well together because we're so completely different, but we meet somewhere so beautifully in the middle. And I'm grateful for that, because when one of us is at the one end of the scale, we each bring each other back to the middle. It's the same with how you work with people. It's understanding that if you're wanting, to take on someone who is knowing to you neurodivergent,
mm,
you cannot treat them in the same way that you would somebody who's neurotypical,
yeah,
because it's not going to work. Like, if education, and I could be, I mean, I'm not been at school for a long time and I don't quite know how it's working now within schools, but if education was catered to those who were neurodivergent and was tailored to suit each individual pupil, which I understand costs and various other things make that really difficult, I can guarantee you that more pupils and students in schools and colleges would absolutely reach their potential, because it's understanding that their brain doesn't work in the same way. And even if you've got two people with ADHD, those two people can have an entirely different way of doing things. They can have crossover symptoms, crossover in things that they do, which are markers of it, but they will never think or feel in the same way.
exactly.
And so I think, as an employer employing, and that's maybe one of the things that I probably look out for people who are more neurodivergent, and even more so than me, because I can absolutely guarantee they will have a skill set that they won't have been using to the full potential. Because people don't always want that, but I do, because I think, actually, do you know what? You put them in an environment where they thrive and they will give you their absolute best, and they'll be grateful to you for you putting them in that environment, really.
It's giving an opportunity, it's opening a door that wouldn't generally be open. And that's so huge. And that's why actually home education may be on the rise because of that as well, because that one-to-one that a parent can give, and whether they're qualified as a teacher or not is actually irrelevant, really. It's that time that you can even facilitate your child being able to learn in an easier environment for them and their needs is incredible.
Absolutely.
Me being able to observe that in children is just fascinating thing, because they're able to build on their own interests at a very young age, and I find that fascinating, and they can build on their strengths. And I was just thinking, just a small point before we spin it into a positive here, is that another positive is that it was the question of, would it be fair for someone to expect someone with a physical difficulty or disability to do something extremely physical and get it done perfectly?
Could you imagine trying to do that in today's workplace
Can you
with all
imagine?
the legislation and laws, as
Can you
well?
imagine
Because,
someone not having a good balance and then being expected to do a marathon?
well, it's discrimination, really, in the workplace.
Exactly.
It's very, very difficult, but I'm understanding that from the recent documentaries I've seen on TV about those who do have physical disabilities are still struggling to get the things that they need in the workplace, or even just on public transport. It's absolutely, it blows my mind, really, that there is still a level of,
I mean,
discrimination and maybe as well understanding and empathy needed within that community. So
and I think even with London, for example, it's supposed to be one of the great cities for disabilities, for people to be able to access everything. I brought my husband in a wheelchair, and I'm sorry, but it did not find public transport very accessible, if I'm honest. And that was like the undergrounds and trains. I just didn't find them as accessible as it had boasted to be.
No, exactly.
And so next time we go, we will try, and it's new to us, to be honest. So next time we go, we will try buses, and let's see how that works out for us. It may actually work out better for us, but it's just interesting because it's just, the world hasn't really adapted just yet. But
you
let's
know.
then say that in it, like exactly what you said, then would it be fair to expect someone with a neurological condition or a difficulty to be able to do something that's different to their norm and the same as every other people's norm, you know? So
I
it's just
think
really important to remember that fact.
I think that's the key. I think that just, you know, very, very briefly on this, that if people with physical disabilities are still, you know, they get in there to some degree, but it's very slow. I know that we're going to be years behind again,
Yeah.
but because and people always have difficulty understanding what they can't see,
Of
and that's
course.
the problem, you know.
Yeah.
So that there's that issue as
An
well, that
invisible issue, yeah. Yeah.
absolutely, it goes back to even those who have physical disabilities that maybe are not clear from the outside. My mum's faced that kind of discrimination, unfortunately, as well, and it's horrendous. So yeah, I think, unfortunately, I think there is a bit of a battle ongoing, but if you know that somebody within your workplace or within your life, within your family, is either not even diagnosed, but maybe suspects that they have a neurodivergent brain, just work with it, not against
Yeah.
it, because if you
Yeah.
work against it, they'll push back even harder and you won't get anywhere.
No, I
It's not
completely
gonna
agree.
help anybody.
I think we've got to learn to trust our own instincts and our gut
Yeah,
and to
absolutely.
do our, in my opinion, it's not just for those of us who suspect or are diagnosed with it, but to actually for others to learn as well, to educate themselves on it as
Yeah,
well, because
yeah.
that is a really useful tool for them to be able to understand and not to make it a difficulty or an
No,
issue in the workplace or in
no,
life.
no,
And
and I
that's
mean
where I want
that's,
to take it into spin. I want to put this
yeah.
into a positive light. And I want to say, what people do forget is we're human
Yeah.
and we all have our struggle in life. Doesn't matter what type of brain we've got. And that ADHD doesn't have to be a negative. So then I want to ask, tell me your positives.
I wrote a blog article maybe
You
last year, the
did.
year before, I can't remember that. And it hit some controversy. I don't think I really told many people about the
Mhm,
controversy. It was entitled "I'm Making My ADHD My Superpower,"
mhm,
and there's a lot of people who say people think it's a superpower, but it's actually not. Now, don't get me wrong, and I'm pretty sure Luke would agree with me on this 100%. When I am bad, when those darker things come over me, there is no way it's a superpower. It really is
mhm.
not. But if I channel it and channel my energy in the right direction, in the right place, I literally feel unstoppable. Like, you know, even with, you know, what we said about academia earlier, that everybody's different and people might not like certain subjects. Well, then don't do what you don't like. You know,
Mm.
if you're in a position, if you're in a workplace and you're thinking, you know, you're doing admin, but really you're a creator, then work with that. Find something that enables you maybe to start with a bit of both and build out, gain that experience, understand how it all works, and then run with it. You know, or if you need to express yourself in a creative way, if you do have to do a very boring job, then find a hobby that works with you as
Yeah.
well. I think it's all about where you channel it. You know, my perfectionism is a horrendous thing to have, but at the same time, there is a positive in that it does make you work harder and see things from very different perspectives.
Mhm.
It's sometimes it's not about the fact that each of these things are positive in themselves, but it's about putting a spin on it that helps you deal with what you're living with, you know.
Yeah.
And when
True.
somebody tells you you're failing or you're poor at what you do or you shouldn't do it, that's when you turn around and you say, I'm very great. Thank you for sharing that opinion with me. But I think I'll go now. I'll move on and I'll work 3 times as hard to prove that I can, or I'll take it in a different direction, or I'll refine myself to show you that I will be the best at this and I will be better than anybody. And it's not, don't get me wrong, you have to have balance, because that attitude is not always healthy. But you know, when we were talking about positive spins, some of the biggest things, that you've got some incredible historical figures who
Yes.
who we think of as achieving so much in their life, who have been suspected or were diagnosed with ADHD. John
Let's,
Lennon. How many of
let's
us
look at that.
feel?
Yeah. So let's look at that because I actually looked at a few of these. You mentioned Albert Einstein,
Yeah.
who we know what he accomplished. I mean, he was a
Where would
theoretical
we be
physicist.
without E equals
Yeah,
MC squared? You know, there's
I
all of
mean,
that.
he was an absolute genius, and it is believed that he dealt with ADHD throughout his life. And he was a classic case. He was forgetful. He couldn't find his keys, and he often seemed oblivious to his surroundings, apparently. And it's really interesting because because I saw a video today and it was an ADHD one on Instagram and it made me chuckle. And I sent it to my husband and he just laughed because it was basically me in a nutshell. And it showed you a person and it said people without ADHD and how they leave the house. And it was pretty good. I mean, yes, they looked for their keys. They found their keys. They forgot their coat or something or their bag and they just went into the house, picked up the bag and left. Have you seen that video? And then
I've
the other
seen
one
one similar.
yeah, so again, I think we've discussed this as well, but it was another one again. And it was like, then it got people with ADHD and it's got them going back into their bag, coming back out, then forgetting their keys, going back out, then forgetting something else, going back in. And then it was a case of they'd gone in and out like 5 times. And then eventually they ran back because they forgot to lock the door. That's me. I mean, I'll eventually remember everything, but it's a case of, have I locked the door? Have I turned off the oven? Have they, and it's this constant process and it's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. But at the same time, I can think ahead. We can watch a movie or we can watch a series of something and I'll just straight out say it's that guy who's who's the killer. Or it's I can ruin it for my husband so many times. Or I can say, oh, this happens, and I've never seen this program before.
I call that ADHD foresight, don't it? The idea that you almost
tell.
know the answer to things before.
And I've got really good gut instincts as well about
Yeah.
people. And it's not just about characters on TV, but I've got good instincts about people. And then I was reading up on that, and again, apparently that's another thing to do with ADHD, where you've got just different senses to other people. And I'm okay with that. If that makes it a positive, great, I'll take it.
No, I know. Absolutely.
That's a good thing. I mean, you mentioned Walt Disney, and I don't know why I didn't think about that one before. Didn't hear about
Imagine the things he created. That man was just unbelievable, really.
But the empire. I mean, everybody loves Disney. Well,
I know.
Love Disney. And it's like Disney World is just a huge thing. And people love it. And it gives you the adrenaline, doesn't it? It gives you the dopamine. And it's like, it's a huge thing. And it's a lovely kind of thing where families can enjoy it. And everybody can enjoy it. And how incredible is that came out of his mind?
I know.
And the success that it's brought to him. I mean, if he was still alive, he'd be very happy to hear what happened. The other one then was really interesting as well, was like you said, John Lennon. I mean, what a fascinating character. And the music that he's been able to create is just incredible. So, and some people might have thought that these ones were useless. They wouldn't be able to do anything, but you were wrong. And again, it's about thinking outside the box. I think you and I do that a lot, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thinking outside of the box. And I think that's really important. And we can achieve anything that we want to achieve. And I think it's a good lesson to kind of end on, really, is that we can achieve more than we maybe expect of ourselves, and to not take ADHD as a negative in life or in business. What I love about MPAS UK and how you and Luke have got it in such a way is, like you said earlier, you and Luke are really good as a team. You work really well. And what I love about it is that you work to your strengths and you allow the team to work to their strengths as well.
Yes.
And
at least we try.
Huge. As much as you can. And this is the thing, it's like, it's never going to be perfect, right? And we're going to have to do the mundane stuff and we're going to have to do the important stuff. But it's really good to remember that for employers out there and for employees also, to recognize this is doable. This is something that you can actually have a team with really strong contenders who are able to do what they do best, allowing them, like you said, to try out their creative side, or to maybe adjust to another position just to see if that would work out better for them. But the other thing I do know as well, and I don't know if that's my personality or if it's the possibility of the ADHD, is how loyal I am. Because I hate disappointing anyone and I hate making people feel bad. And I'm a really loyal person, unless you completely cross me.
Yeah,
and absolutely. I'm really cautious. But in general, I think that's a real positive for me. And you're probably the same.
I think that idea of like I'm loyal like a dog. I really, really am. And I'm, I think that's when people then turn around and you've done all you can for them and you really worked hard for them, and they turn around and they say, well, this is not good enough. I don't like this. This is not right. This is wrong. You shouldn't do this. That's why it hurts more, because you have tried to make their life as easy as possible by doing so much that you can, and they just completely throw it back in your face. And that's when you realize maybe that level of loyalty, as good as being good as loyalty absolutely is, and it's a wonderful quality to have. I do think that sometimes as ADHDers we can be excessively loyal, even to the point where we allow ourselves to get hurt,
or taken for granted.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, it's we're all prone to having to learn life's lessons as well, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't make us any better than the next person, but it's really valuable advice there as well, is that we've got to take care of ourselves too, because I know as a personality, I go overboard. I help so much and too much sometimes, to the detriment perhaps of my own health and my family and time with my family. And I have to be so careful that my boundaries are set. And it's taken years, absolute years. I'm getting a lot better, unless hyperfocus comes in. And then I'm away for a while. I'm like, sorry, people, but I have to try and find the balance.
Yeah.
So I use timers for that. And the kids hate the fact that I use timers on things. But honestly, it's the only way I can function, really. If I've got to make myself either motivate myself to do something, I put a timer on, or I put a timer on to limit myself.
Yeah. I think that's a really balanced way of looking at it. And I just think, like, going back to the greats who were suspected to have ADHD and that hyperfocus as well, that can you imagine if those people hadn't hyperfocused?
Yeah.
The things that we wouldn't have achieved, the things that science wouldn't have been pushed forward, music wouldn't have been so beautiful,
art. You had a list of like Da Vinci, Mozart.
I know. I mean, Da Vinci,
Newton, Roosevelt.
Absolutely. I mean, there are the people. I was disappointed because the majority of the list was men. There were very few women, but I imagine there's more that haven't yet, when they haven't been looked at. But you think of somebody like Agatha Christie, and if you were to look at her
dysgraphia, wasn't it? Yeah.
Hey?
They said she had, like, was it dysgraphia or
something? I can't remember what. But if you look at her life, you can actually see it, because the reality is, unfortunately, it was a very strange life that she lived. She abandoned her children. She just went through a phase where she almost disappeared, and completely then almost reinvented herself. And whilst ever that's not something I endorse in any way, shape or form, there are things that make sense about people when you understand, actually, they may well have or have had ADHD, because you lock yourself away and you put yourself in this little bubble, and that's it. You can't be you. When I say you can't, nobody should disturb you in that moment.
Yeah, it's true.
But without those periods of hyperfocus, I think, without neurodivergent people in the world, whether it's autism, whether it's ADHD, whether it's any form of spectral condition, we wouldn't have the things that we have. We wouldn't have the places, the people, the artwork, the music, the various things that we've got. So I think, if
anything, it actually adds value.
It adds value.
It adds
value. Yeah. It adds warmth. It adds empathy.
Personality
to a very grim and dark world that we live in. So I think, just if there's one thing maybe to be final, to finish on, really, it's if you have somebody, or somebody who is neurodivergent, take time to really get to know and understand them, and then if you're working with that person, to utilize their strengths, because honestly, if you do that, you'll see a whole spark of magic that you won't, that once it's untapped, that's it. You've got something precious forever.
I completely agree with that. I think that's a lovely note to end on. And just one last thing as well from me is that to expect the ebbs and flows that come with it. Because the rest periods that also come with the hyperfocus periods.
Yes.
It's really important to remember those and to understand and to not have the high expectations. But I really agree with you. Let the magic come, and you will see it. And I just think that's incredible, and it's such an important discussion. So thank you for joining, and thank you for being so honest and brutally honest, really, because it's really important for people to feel understood.
Yeah, and I think the level of, I think sometimes my poor clients wonder, why is she oversharing this, and why is she doing this, and why? Basically, this is, in my head, it's better for you to know more than you need to know, and then you can do with that information whatever you will. I would rather that, but I also want clients to understand that even though sometimes the way I work is a bit backwards, it's always for the benefit. And that's what we're trying. And we don't always get it right. Mistakes will be made. Please don't expect complete perfection, but know that we will work harder than anybody else to make sure that it is where it should be.
Yes, exactly. And that's a really huge thing too. It's the fact that because you said there's something really interesting, which I've got to speak now. You know, when you said that about sometimes it can look backwards, it's because we have seen the flaws and the faults in other processes, and so these processes have been tweaked to make it work even better as a process. So it's not that we're backwards or doing anything wrong or badly. It's actually because we've already learned from other people's mistakes, even other accountants who now we've got their clients on board, and we're seeing the mistakes and we're going, right, for us to correct these things or for us to change our process in order to improve this, we've got to do ABC. And it's just really important that people understand that it's actually a good thing. It's we have got our processes in there, and like you said, we've also got our processes where it is double and triply checked, and by the end it is made sure as that it's as good as it can get. And to be honest, I mean, accountants, we're here for a reason. Bookkeepers, we're here for a reason. It's something that you don't want to be doing.
No,
our clients don't want to be doing that job, and it's something that we actually enjoy doing it for the most part. So I think bring it on. Bring it on.
Yes, please.
The number ninja and the digital Jedi and everyone on the team say bring it on.
Bring it on. You've said it now.
Yeah, I've said it now. Yeah, gotta go. Right, I'm gonna love you and leave you. Thank you so much for that. And I think we've ticked all the boxes that we were hoping to tick there. And probably opened a conversation for another day. But if any clients are out there that want to chat about it, go for it. You know, anyone, because I think the more who understand and who speak about it, the better.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
On that note, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for this, and we will talk very soon.
Talk soon.
Take care. Thank you.